Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this Sunday afternoon for David's talk. I'm Daisha Xu. I'm the artistic director of Qualia Contemporary Art. I think most people probably already know our gallery. And if you are not familiar with our gallery, either you can go to our website, that's just qualiagallery.com. And you can get on our Instagram and other social media. If you are in the Bay Area, please follow us for our exhibition. And if you send on our website, you can sign in. You can just subscribe our newsletter. So we will inform you for each new shows or artist talk or any events related to art. Today, first I want to give a brief introduction for David, and then I'm going to show a short video which features the exhibition in the physical space in the gallery. And then I will just pass the podium to David, and he's going to give a very, I promise you, a very interesting talk. So David Frazer, he's a professor emeritus of painting in the Fine Arts Division, Rhode Island Design School. He has taught since 1978, and he was the chair there for 8 years. He got his BFA from RISD in 1970 in painting, and his MA in painting from University of New Mexico. He has exhibited across the United States just recently, including Gallery at 4 in Tiverton, Rhode Island in 2021 and 2019, the Shazan, I hope I said it right, or Shazan Gallery, Providence, Rhode Island in 2018, and a major show in Newport Art Museum at Newport, Rhode Island. And also 2016, he had a show in Stanford, in the Stanford Faculty Club. In 1969-70s, as an undergraduate, he was chosen to participate in the Rhode Island European Honor Program in Italy. And also, I'm not sure whether I'm allowed to mention, and David's wife, Annika, and she's from Holland. So somehow I think David is bound with Europe. So he has just traveled extensively and intensively there. In 1989, he actually traveled to China, and he got really fascinated by China. So since 2000, especially since 2015, he visits China regularly, and he taught in China Academy of Art, that is 中国美院以前的浙江美院. He taught there, and he lectured in China, and he has exhibited very extensively in China in Shandong Museum, Shenyang, and in Beijing. Currently, he's included in a show, a group show in Shanghai, in the Art Palace in Shanghai. And I think I should stop here because I know David probably is the best person to talk about his art practice and his teaching. So when he finishes his presentation, we will basically open the Q&A to the audience, and you are more than welcome to type your question. Even during the talk, you can type your question in the chat, or also you raise your hand, and either Philip and I will just enable you so you can talk. So I'm going to quickly show you a short video.
create a plan for the painting ahead of painting it. It means simply that I'm putting down color and shapes and letting the painting evolve, you know, as I think about it. And I combine elements of the both organic with the geometric, which is more like architecture, and then with a series of motifs that I've settled on perhaps in the last 10 years that are to me meaningful. That can be done with color, and it can be done with spatial play, but it can also be done by thinking about how one paints it this way versus that way. Two things. One is the big dot surface, and then if you see surfaces that have very small and more intricate dots, that's from something that's like I call it bus wrap. I just use it as a stencil to create an atmospheric layer. Rhythmically and with control, I can do any number of these things that I enjoy. Couldn't help myself but think about all of the kind of plastic that's floating in the ocean and the fish nets that are lost and then you know, fish are caught. The forms that started to take place were initially the big whale-like, you know, fish that are here. But it's more movement depending on the size. Everything in this painting is moving in circular, floating. Prose and poetry. There's fact and there's fiction. These are fiction and they're poetry. So there's a transition of color that comes down. I build with gravity and building these this kind of combinations of forms, and then at the same time I've created these sort of overlays of atmospheric particles, you know, that again suggest atmosphere, you know. So our eyes pick up nuances that create composition order in places.
Thank you. So the purpose, you know, I show this video, I think it's really encourage you all to visit museums and galleries and in person. I know right now it's quite easy to look at art from a computer, but I think the experience is quite different. Also, when we have openings, we encourage you to come because you have the opportunity to talk to the artists. And most of the time, I think from now on, if the situation allows, we usually invite artists to come. And sometimes they stay a couple of days. If you're really concerned about the COVID, you don't want to get in the public. And if you have a small group, sometimes you can even schedule a special tour with the artist or with me. With all that said, I'm going to pass the podium to you, David.
Okay, Dacia, I'm going to hit the shared screen.
Yes.
There.
Did you open your PowerPoint?
I did, but I wonder if it went behind.
Is that the slide 3? You can just click, yeah, click that once it'll come up.
I had it ready. There it is.
Good.
I'll just increase it to enter full screen. Okay. All right. Great. That video was made, I didn't even realize it was being made, you know, while I was out at the Qualia Contemporary for the openings that we had. And there were a lot of questions and I answered them as best I could off the cuff. Today is going to be a little different. I'm going to do a slideshow and I have already a scripted text that I want to read. And I'm hoping it's going to be interesting and successful for you to participate with. Let me start by saying I've painted since 1967, but loved looking at paintings even as a teenager. When I first started teaching at RISD in 1978, I thought everyone who majored in painting loved painting too. To my dismay, I learned differently. I realized quickly that there are many reasons to pursue art and choose painting, and if you don't already love paintings, then you may learn to or not. It's not the only way to be an artist, but when I was a teacher, I cared about my students and what they cared to make. But in my studio, I only care about painting. I am more comfortable saying I'm a painter rather than an artist because I care most about that tradition, its craft, the thinking and making above all else, and painting is all I do. My talk today is mostly about my work, especially in the Qualia Contemporary exhibit, but I also, as a retired teacher, would like to show some of the ways to experience painting in form and content, to explain abstraction, improvisation, and the motivation to paint. First, this proposition about abstraction. All paintings are abstract. All paintings are abstract. Abstraction is the grammar, the music of painting, whether it is explicitly abstract or representational. Most people think in categories. Is it an abstract or a representational painting? I want to stress that abstraction is and always has been the basic language of painting, its most fundamental language and form. In the 20th century, abstraction became the content and form of abstract expressionism, for example. As a teenager, my first love was Flemish Dutch painting. I had the good fortune and maybe the common sense to want to see paintings in museums and not so much in books. I was intimidated by reproductions in books as a teenager, but in front of a painting, I could feel the painting of that artist, flesh to flesh, so to speak. In a book, a painting has no flesh, less bone, less heart, and no hand. You must stand in front of a painting to know it. If an artist today is a provocateur, a social critic, a storyteller, a propagandist, or an activist, then film, video, and performance are the appropriate vehicles. Movies are our dominant cultural form. With the internet, my students are very knowledgeable about contemporary art and artists, sometimes without seeing the actual work. Yet most seem to care less about the history of painting, and some believe that older works have less relevance to them. Perhaps they're right, but I would like to make a case that, at least for me, dead artists are still alive and relevant. Today, I want to suggest that painting and history are critically interdependent. I've loved the paintings of Cezanne, Morandi, Ryder, Guston, Kandinsky, Klein, Hoffman, but today I'm going to talk about how Renaissance artists like Giotto, Piero, Caravaggio, and Botticelli have influenced my work. I first went to Italy as a student in 1969 for 1 year, and then again lived in Rome from 95 to 1998, and for the next 7 summers after that. Here are some of the paintings that I have loved and a small number of the paintings I have made since 2010, but I'm going to start with this Caravaggio. The Martyrdom of St. Matthew in Rome since 1600. This is a remarkable composition of geometry, spatial depth, and theatrical light. Geometry orders the elements. Imagine lines from corner to corner. Imagine a line from corner to corner, and you will see an X in the overall grouping of the figures. Then see the triangle formed by the horizontal figure of Matthew, the central figure's arms, and the central figure's arms. His right arm of the assassin pointing to the prone figure on the left, propped up by his arms, and then the assassin's left arm reaching down to the arm of Matthew. These are the primary organizational shapes, the X and the triangle, that order the elements of this work. There are many more secondary repeats and continuities of direction, etc. Spatial depth is created by depth of field, very similar to focusing a camera. The central figures are absolutely clear and sharp, while the other figures fade in detail and into the dark. The bottom left figure holds the foreground, but it's slightly out of focus, letting us focus on the central event. The lighting is dramatic in a theatrical way, a staged tableau. This is quite a large painting, by the way, probably about 12 by 12 feet.
Excuse me, David. You might be able just to use your mouse to point to things when you talk. You want, I think. No problem. But
it doesn't, I can't see the cursor on the screen.
oh, I see. Okay, that's all right.
I would have liked to have done that, Dacia. I believe it's a lot easier to draw the things about. This Botticelli, this is in the Uffizi in Florence from 1482. This is a huge painting. This is a beautiful asymmetrical allegory which purposely plays with fact and fiction. The figures are in three groups. The primary figure is alone, and the light coming from the trees behind. Take a good look at that central figure with the red cape across her dress, and then the light coming through the trees behind her head. And the light coming from the trees create either a halo or, in my view, the wings of an angel. The entire surface is dotted with shapes of fruit and flowers, which are on the dress of the allegorical figure of spring. Spring in a flowered dress holds flowers in her hands. They spill out into the air and they grow up from the ground. Which flowers are real and which are the ones of the illustrated dress? All are fiction, but in this context, fact and fiction are being purposely mixed. Giotto this is one of the panels at the Scrovini Chapel in Padua, 1305. The Kiss of Judas. Judas is identifying the Jesus Christ in the garden for the Roman soldiers so they can arrest him. I love the narrative complexity of this painting. Figure groups playing independent actions, but all important to the central act. Another triangle is used in this composition as well. The gold yellow cape of Judas combines with the purple cape to the left to form a triangle. I hope you can see that. The kiss, which identifies Christ for the soldiers who have come to arrest him, is interesting because Judas's head is actually the center of the painting. Jesus stands erect and passive while Judas with his pug face leans forward to plant his kiss. Multiple actions are being performed by the others, which give a realism to the crowded scene. In my view, like an Altman, Robert Altman soundtrack or a Fellini film. Piero della Francesca, the Madonna del Parto in Monturchi, 1467. This is a loved fresco. Unfortunately, the top section has been lost, but many pregnant Italian women still come to this fresco to have their Madonna, the Madonna, bless their birth. I first saw this fresco in 1995 with its identical angels. Now look at the angels. They are exactly the same. There's a template shape that's been used for each of them, only it's been reversed. They're exactly the same, only reversed and slightly askew. Red and green colors are the same in each, only red wing, red dress, green dress, socks, etc. This is obvious once you've seen it, but they're subtle and balanced. It gave me the confidence to use templates and repetition more explicitly in my work. This paint's mine. It refers to the Gulf oil spill and is one of many at the time I titled Hubris. With this, I've tried to generate a similar complexity, but it's lyrical and abstract. Let me give you a sense of scale. You can see it's about 5 by 5 feet. It describes what is above and below with combinations of symbols, geometric structures, and natural flow. Now, let me ask a few questions of this work and how you might look at it and other paintings that are new to you. Some of you are very used to looking at art and looking at paintings, but I suspect some of the people that have joined our webinar today, are less experienced, particularly when it comes to work that is not obviously realistic and telling a specific story. First thing you got to do when you look at this painting, when you look at anything in contemporary art, is you inventory the facts. You look at what's in the painting. Is the process, questions you might ask, is the process constructed or simultaneous? Simultaneous is the tradition of working the whole canvas, bringing it to a finish altogether. Impressionism is a good example of simultaneity. Many contemporary paintings today are constructed, whether planned or unplanned. Perhaps because our world is a mix of lights and illusions, sources from TV, advertising, life, etc., many different realities. My painting is constructed, unplanned, built piece by piece, and often destroys segments or images that don't relate to the final resolution. Another question might be asked, is the style or the technique homogeneous or heterogeneous? Most traditional paintings are made with a single stylistic voice, even an exaggerated or invented one like Van Gogh. But some paintings today intentionally mix multiple and sometimes contradictory styles. My painting is heterogeneous, intentionally using an eclectic combination of linear and painterly techniques. Regarding imagery, is the painting a literal representation or uses symbols or metaphor? Well, my painting uses both, intentionally to ask myself and the viewer to question what is there. Spatial illusion, is it deep or shallow, realistic or abstract? This painting is somewhat deep spatially, but the aggressive surface textures insist on the physical reality of the painted surface. So there are elements of contradiction, intentional in this work. The next thing to really ask yourself once you've gone and looked deeply and long at a painting without judgment, what does this painting try to do in its own terms? Not yours, its terms. How successful is the result? This painting is a landscape, or is it a seascape? There is a horizon. The realistic elements are eggs. What do they represent? For me, an egg is a perfect form, a vessel of potential birth, but it is also incredibly fragile. Do the eggs sit on the ground or do some float? The color is dark and moody and the sky ominous. There are elements of twisted architectural structures, an implication of destruction, and natural forms that undulate throughout. The questions asked are, that I think need to be asked when looking at this painting is, where is this? Where are we? What is happening? I'll leave these questions for later when I discuss the series I've titled Hubris. And then finally, determine the historical context. This is important if you're interested in art being something that is new and not just, a retread of past, work. How does this work have contemporary relevance? Is it new or is it derivative? Could this painting, this one we're looking at now, have been done in the 19th or early 20th century? Does it look like any other work by another artist? I'll leave this for you to decide. Giotto, again. The Last Supper, like the Kiss of Judas, is also in Padua at the Scrovini Chapel. This painting is so peculiar, almost atypical of Giotto's designs. It seems to have the figures painted first and then the architecture imposed onto the scene. It's It is the Last Supper, and a column hides the face of the Christ figure. It seems almost an improvisation or a mistake, but the result is so real, so normal. This painting of mine seems like the previous Giotto. Obvious to me, but after I made the painting. Let me say that again, after I made the painting. Did Giotto influence my choices? Did my experience with his Last Supper suggest this solution? Perhaps, but not before I finished it. All the paintings that I've made and those made by others that I have loved are embedded in my memory and influence my decisions, both consciously and subconsciously. Over the years, I've come to realize that many of my decisions, at least, are rooted in memory and then mixed with the life I'm living now. From the Hubris series, water, fluid, derricks, oil derricks, up and down, right side up and upside down. Where are we? I mentioned that hubris was the title of a group of paintings that I made a few years back. The definition of hubris is being out of touch with reality and overestimating one's own competence or capabilities, especially for people in positions of power. Hubris is dangerous and often has tragic consequences. This certainly applies to our country as the dominant geopolitical and cultural power of the past half century. Corporate greed, its influence on our politics, and the willful ignorance of the American people are having dangerous and devastating global results. In late 2009 and early 2010, the primary news events given radio and TV time were the disasters at the Upper Big Branch mine and the British Petroleum Deepwater Horizon in the Gulf of Mexico. Safety violations at the mine and extreme deep drilling for oil with no advances in safety or cleanup techniques since the Exxon Valdez are examples of corporate hubris. These paintings were made during that period. While I was painting and listening to these tragic events, these stories became the subject without premeditation. Memory mixed with our daily lives can come together in ways that are useful and unplanned, and painting helps me sort them out. This painting is called Timber. It is the oil rig sinking to the bottom of the Gulf or the deforestation of our natural environment? It doesn't matter because they're essentially the same, equally destructive to our planet. I've also made many paintings on paper. All my paintings are oil on canvas or paper. I started painting on paper during the decade I traveled back and forth to Italy. During the summer of 2011, I set out about making a series of black and white paintings, simply to see if I could make a satisfying body of work without color or temperature. It was just a simple sort of studio task. And I was very happy doing them, but I prefer again to let color roll. My garden is also a preoccupation and subject of many of my paintings. In Rome, there's a frescoed room from the house of Livia, wife of Emperor Augustus, about 58 BC. I'm sorry I don't have a slide for this, but it is extraordinary. If you get a chance to be in Rome, you have to seek this out. Her dining room depicts a Roman garden fresco along 3 walls with a fenced foreground. This fresco shows the beauty of nature, but nature that can be managed and controlled. I'm not sure this is entirely true or even a good thing. I try to control my garden, but it's always a battle of weeds, volunteers, and pleasant surprise. Simply a scale shot as well, very large painting. In 2013, I began a body of work I referred to as call and response. I started to think about bird calls with a tradition in music and African American church services as well. I realize the call and response explains fairly well my improvisational approach to painting. My paintings are never pre-planned. I simply lay down colors and shapes until I see the possibility for structures and objects and build the painting according to a call, a new shape, a color, or form, and then a response until it's complete. This is a very small painting. I welcome chaos and then the challenge to make of it with composition, order, and resolution. You know, again, this painting and this one are not happy paintings because my wife and I were losing one of our very best friends to cancer at that time. Now I'd like to finish with a few more works that are exhibited at the Qualia Contemporary Show. Like the previous paintings, they are responses to nature, often my own garden, where I live, or just concern for the planet. This piece is called Reflections. It's a world of water, upside and down. Finland, a kind of jokey title, obviously doesn't refer to the country. A joyous love of color and movement, but threatened by overfishing, lost nets, and oil pollution in the water. Last Embers of Daylight is a landscape of loss. West Side, where I live in Providence, bricks and walls all over. Rose Simple, back to where we began. My great-grandfather was a coastal sea captain sailing from Nova Scotia to New York. My grandmother would quote his favorite adage, "Red sky at night, sailors delight. Red sky in the morning, sailors take warning." In summation, I'd like to repeat that memory influences both conscious and subconscious decisions, and they condition how and what I make. Painting is a type of visual writing. Like writing, there is prose and poetry. I'm in favor of poetry. And when I achieve satisfactory form and expressive content, I know it's finished. But this is a big but. Unfortunately, the value of these efforts must always be in doubt. If you paint abstractly, you must get comfortable with doubt and do it for yourself and no one else. Okay, thank you very much. That's the end of that lectured slideshow. Back to you, Dacia. I guess
Thank you so much, David. And so we'll start the Q&A session. So here, there's one question. When you started painting, what do you begin with first? And what helps you determine what elements to add to your art?
Well, like I was saying about, call and response, basically, again, my early studies as an art student, was during that period, just post, abstract expressionism, when perhaps pop art was a stronger influence, in the New York art market. But abstract expressionism appealed to me a great deal. And the business of just spontaneously, at least deciding on a few colors, a few areas of paint, spilling paint, painting it. Sometimes I put the paint down when it's still wet and I blow it around with my shop vac in reverse, basically trying to create an atmosphere, a kind of landscape of color and shape that then begins to suggest, the motifs or structures that I start to build into it, wrapping forms or building geometric, conditions like wire traps or building scaffolding and so on. But as the painting takes shape in this improvisational way, it begins to also take shape in terms of expression. So that if, like the Hubris series, I'm listening to the Gulf oil just pouring thousands of gallons of crude oil up into the Gulf of Mexico, that affects my mood. It affects my frame of mind, and the painting takes on that kind of combination of the life I'm living, I'm thinking about, seeing and listening to on NPR or whatever, and then the shapes turn into elements that then combine together, and they have to add, subtract, struggle with the whole condition until finally there's something that sort of makes sense. You know, I don't know if that's the best way I can answer that.
Thank you. I think almost continue with that question. There's another question. How did you decide on particular motifs throughout your paintings?
Oh, the motifs are like eggs, flowers, birds, the apples, you know. These things started back as one thing and have become something else for me over the years. Apples were something I started to paint just as a studio practice, wondering, you know, how I could go about doing it. And then, but it also at that time, what it meant for me was I was thinking a lot about the fact that the apple is the symbol of original sin in the Garden of Eden by Adam and Eve. Well, as a young painter from the 60s, representational painting was almost a sin. If you were a representational painter, you must not be very intelligent, because painting had evolved into something that was supposed to be entirely abstract. So I started painting apples as maybe as a way of just saying, well, I don't give a damn. You know, it's like I believe in abstraction, but I also believe that representation is still legitimate. The eggs were things, again, that are fragile and about birth. And I have 3 children. And in the beginning, I made a lot of paintings that only had 3 eggs in them. Eventually that, you know, that became something of the past, and not now. The flowers are, Dacia mentioned my wife is Dutch, and tulips are a big part of the Dutch history. And I started thinking about what are things that I could include in my paintings that would be painted in a different language than perhaps the way I do the eggs or the apples. And I started looking at intaglio prints, etchings, and so on of Dutch tulips from the 17th century, and started to mimic the linear forms, you know, found in an etching, only through paint and through fine brushes. And but the tulips started because of my wife. The egg started because of my children. The apple started because it was you know, that representation was a sin. And the birds and squirrels that are also in my paintings are just abundant in my yard, and I deal with them. The birds are great. The squirrels are a pain. They just keep eating our tulip bulbs. But that's how I decided on the motifs. And again, they don't tell a story, but they give a suggestion of the kind of poetic intent behind the pictures.
So do you think you would add more motifs in the future?
Anything is possible. I would say that up until now, in the last 10 years, I've been reducing the amount of motifs rather than expanding them.
Interesting.
Because in some ways, I don't want the paintings to be different because of the things that are in them. I want them to be different because of my color choices, my material choices, and ultimately the abstract, you know, combination of all of those things in the paintings. So that, you know, in the show at your gallery right now, Dacia, you know, all the paintings have all of these motifs, and all of these paintings are done by me, and I think they're clearly done by the same person. but they're all very different. And that's what I care most about.
So there's another question. Clearly, you imply you express your life and emotion in your work. Does the acknowledgement of that ever stump creativity?
Does that ever stop creativity?
Stump, S-T-U-M-P. I think that, I mean, I'll let you answer, but I probably can make a few comments.
Well,
I don't think so, but I want you to answer the
answer
question.
that this way, and maybe I don't quite understand the question.
I
I've had one goal for a very long time, decades and decades, and that was that I could get up every day and go to my studio in the morning and paint, and not sit around and worry about what I was supposed to be painting, you know. So the idea of having an inspiration for what a painting should become doesn't interest me at all. I want to be in the process, and during the process, the painting becomes something. So for me, I need to get up every day and paint. Now, some days I just want to render things. I might just do eggs and apples, you know. I might do mimic, you know, prints of tulip flowers. And other days I want to sand the paintings, splash painting around, be much more aggressive, you know, with the whole the process of it. So I'm never stumped.
Yeah, I think that because the person didn't put a name, so I cannot just call this person. Otherwise, I can enable you, you can talk. I think probably the idea is if you have a clear idea what you want to express, then this might, you know, just hurt the creativity. I think we all in life, we are basically trying to express things about our life, about our emotion, but that doesn't, I don't think that would hurt the creativity. Actually, if you have a stronger desire to express your feeling, you know, the humanity part, I think you probably get more creative. So whoever, you know, raised this question, you're more than welcome to raise your hand, then I can actually let you talk.
Well, you know, thinking is an interesting condition, because there's thinking in retrospect. You know, I can talk about all the paintings that I've done, and I can talk about them in an analytic and sensible kind of way. But that's different than when I'm making them. When I'm making them, I'm not that analytic, and I'm not that, and I'm not at all sure what it's going to be, what it's going to become. You know, so there again, memory and experience and day-to-day interaction. Is something sad in my life happening right now? Is there something that I'm worried about? Am I happy? You know, am I?
What do I do? Have to raise my hand?
No.
Yeah, now you can talk. Hi.
Oh, it says,
Now go.
okay, it's Ed and Wendy. I've known David for like 30 years. I'm curious how, as China, since you spent so much time there, influenced your work or not, or how?
Oh, it's wonderful to hear your voice. You know, Ed is a remarkable printmaker. You know, like he's lucky to be retired from the University of Indiana now. And Ed is a long time, you know, Italian lover, and done lots and lots of courses and time in Italy as well. China has been a really extraordinarily important condition to my new work. If you can see the work behind me, there's a lot of work back there and around and so on right now that's very intentionally influenced by China, I believe, because it's influenced by Chinese brush painting. I did some brush painting in 1989, in Hangzhou. I'm terrible at it because it's a kind of calligraphy. It's a dance. It's almost like ballet, and I can't stand the regiment, of it. Love, I absolutely love the open spaces of ink painting and the kind of variety of mark making and so on that can be generated by the brush. So in a very long train trip my wife and I had from Beijing to Hami, and then to Urumqi. I think we were on the train for, what was it? It was over 30 hours, and most of it was passing through the desert. And until you get up to the Xinjiang province, which again is the plains and mountains and lakes and so on that are just amazing. It's every bit as beautiful up there as any of our best American parks. But the idea of the reduced palette tonality and color and mark making, and again open spaces, that's the kind of stuff that I think that I've sort of picked up from Chinese traditional brush painting, and it's affecting the current body of work I'm doing.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, David. And Stephanie, would you like to talk?
Stephanie is muted right now.
Hello, Stephanie?
Oh, I don't, well, I'm just curious in knowing your current paintings is related to China. Why do you choose to use reduced color?
Well, simply because, again, traditional brush painting is ink on rice paper or silk. I mean, yes, there are examples of color and so on, but it's primarily what might refer to as a black and white tradition, and yet it's at the same time it's absolutely rich and lovely with extraordinary temperature and nuance.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Stephanie. Yeah, Jennifer, would you like to talk? Jennifer Chen. Otherwise, I'm going to get to the chat questions. Okay.
Hi.
Benjamin?
Hi. So I'm David's grandson.
Wow.
It's a pleasure to be here and to listen. And there were two interesting things from the talk that, as somebody who's not an artist, I picked up on. And the first was your opening remarks that all painting is abstraction, and the latter was when you were talking about how you have to paint for yourself, because particularly when you lead towards certain amounts of abstraction, you're ceding control, and you have to be willing to let that go to some extent. And initially, when I was coming here, I was thinking about, whether or not you felt that you had to cede increased control from abstraction. Obviously, you do. I'm thinking about the most recent gallery of yours that I visited. And you talked a little bit about some of your smaller paintings that had horizontal planes through the middle, and you didn't want them together because you felt like when they were together, people would see a horizon, and you didn't want them to see a horizon. That wasn't your intention. And so I guess my question is, like, how possible is it to get comfortable with ceding that kind of control? And is there anything you do to practice that?
Oh, hi, Ben. Practice it. Yeah, practice it every day, without thinking about it. Again, none of the things that I'm doing. So, I guess if I had to characterize my own work, I think my own work has been significantly better in the last few decades than it was as a younger painter. Because as a younger painter, I was always a little bit more concerned with what the painting was supposed to be about, a justification of it. And I've gotten much, much more comfortable with the kind of, again, the poetic ambiguities, of painting that I allow to happen, in the works themselves. You mentioned those small paintings in the previous show, and I'd correct what you said just a little bit. I showed them in grid formats, because I didn't want them to have I didn't want the landscape-like quality of each little painting to be the subject of the painting. So the subject of the painting became sort of the arrangement of the shapes, colors, apples, so on, that were all around in a group and gridded kind of way. But basically, when it comes down to kind of confidence and control, it's about practice. It's always about practice. I had no idea where my work was going to go, 20 years ago, 40 years ago. I don't have any idea about where my work is going to go in the next 10 or 20 years either. And that's, I'm being optimistic here about my age. I certainly believe that painting can continue right along until I can't, and when I give it up, then it means that it's over, and that's not going to happen if I can help it.
Jennifer, you want to talk or you want me to read your question? Jennifer Carl.
I actually have two kind of questions.
Go ahead.
One is I actually posted there. So
Right.
regarding the title of your painting, when do you have an idea of a likely title for your individual work? Before you start, or during, or afterwards? That's one question, one follow-up question. The other one is, especially in last few years, seems to me so many artists like to use untitled as the title of their artwork. So I want to get your sense. What do you think about that?
Okay, those are both really good questions. I'd never have a title before until the work is finished. And sometimes it's a little, sometimes a little hard to come up with the title, that seems appropriate to the character of the painting. And sometimes it's obvious, you just sort of get to that point. The painting that I showed that called Reflections, for example, it is really such about fog and mist and things that are upside down at the bottom and right side up at the top, the kind of ways that things are reflected in water, puddles and lakes and canals. Finland, for example, I just set out that painting with the idea that I was going to do something with some bright color, uncharacteristic of me. I was going to start with happy colors. And I'm going to sound like Bob Ross if I keep this up, but but then sort of the form started developing, and I recognized that there was the opportunity to create and exploit these forms as fish. And then that gave me the opportunity to do layers of translucent, bubbles and circles and netting characteristics and so on in the painting. And so in the end, the title was determined by the painting, as it always is. Now, if I were even the Hubris series, I was doing those, I probably did 10 or 12 of the Hubris paintings before I came up with that title. But the title eventually sort of came to me when I realized that that the whole idea that British Petroleum thought it could drill 1 mile down under the ocean and draw oil from the seabed of the Gulf and avoid the kind of accident that occurred. I mean, that was just astounding to me. Every night I'd listen to it on the radio during the day, working in the studio. At night, I'd see it on the TV, just these plumes of black petroleum just flowing out of this broken well. So the titles always come at the end. They never come at the beginning. Sometimes as series, like a series of garden paintings and so on. But I have an idea that, but then the painting sometimes becomes something entirely different. You start off with the idea that I'm going to do something that is landscape-like and garden-oriented, and before I know it, it's become something else, and that's the joy of it for me. I never know where I'm going. I only know where I've been.
Thank you. So here the questions from Helen. You mentioned the shape of triangle in paintings a few times. Why is it important? I'll just give you two questions altogether. Do abstract painters have to learn realistic paintings?
What was the last thing you
The
just
second
said?
question, basically, abstract painters have to learn the painting skills for the realistic painting, I think. The representative, yeah.
No, I don't think so. I think there's a lot of lyrical abstractionists that do not know how to render or draw imagery. Some do. Willem de Kooning was probably the best known as an individual who had learned representational and realistic practice, in Holland before immigrating to the United States, eventually becoming an abstract, painter. I'm trying to think now. It was something I had in mind. Would you ask me the question again, Dacia?
So basically, the first question is, I think we will stay on the second one. Basically, for an abstract painter, do you have to know how to paint realistic paintings? I think maybe in the history, quite some they know.
I would say this. I mean, there's so many quotes, and historically, Picasso says you have to learn to draw like Raphael before you can paint like me. I mean, basically every artist is learning from the previous generation of artists. They have to also break from that previous. I'm talking about real artists now. I'm not talking about people that just want to have a developed skill that they demonstrate and show that, hey, I can paint a Rembrandt just as good as Rembrandt. Well, a lot of people can, except that they're not that good. They're not that good because it's irrelevant. There's no longer a life of candles and daylight, as the only thing that's there. So, what you really have, is that basically the notion that one learns from the generations before you, but you also then have to somehow reinvent the whole process, sometimes again, by rejecting, the previous, generation. I rejected the notion that abstraction would not allow me to paint representationally.
And Helen, any further questions? Oh, I'm sorry. The other questions, you mentioned the shape of the triangle in paintings a few times. Why is it important?
Right. Well, basically, geometry, has always been a fundamental organizational tool to painting. So that your basic shapes, whether that be flat geometries like circle, triangle, square, rectangle, so on, or volumetric ones, cylinder, sphere, so on. These things are cone. These elements are integral, to painting, and particularly because they can be useful in organizing information on a painting. To know where the middle of the painting is, to know where its edges are, to actually think of the painting being divided up into two halves or four quarters, to think about the painting again having sometimes it's been described as a painting is you travel through a painting on a visual trail. We do that without even realizing it, okay? But that trail is created by the artist making the painting, so that they basically are leading your eye around in different parts of information that's already embedded in that painting. And geometry is an important thing. I mean, I could just throw up, you know, a couple hundred years of paintings from Rubens to George O'Keeffe, and we could talk about all of the geometry that's really part of those images. We don't necessarily recognize it, you know, as regular observers. We take in the painting, we love what's going on, we're interested in it. We don't see the mechanics that have gone into the making of a painting any more than I can listen to classical music and I don't know it and enjoy it and believe in what I'm listening to, and I haven't a clue, you know, on what goes into making that music in terms of what it needed to become what it's become. So you don't have to see those things, but to know about them is helpful. And as an artist, you better be aware of it, as far as I'm concerned, because again, formal orchestration of elements in a painting, that's not dead. That's not dead. That's going to continue to be very important to pull work together and make it seem necessary.
Yes, I actually want to make a comment, because this morning I spoke with David, and I also put in my social media and said today in the WeChat, I said, David actually is going to talk about visual language. So most of the time we expect, I think as an observer, if you're not an artist, if you're not trained, you know, as an artist, most of the time we basically, the first thing is this visual illusion. We try to grab what we see, you know, it's the ocean, or it's a garden, it's a flower. We are trying to see that, but we ignore that art or painting itself has its own language. It's on the, you know, two-dimensional, it has its own language, and the very basic elements, you know, color and lines and geometric shape and volume. And we are actually very sensitive to that, because this is embedded in our humanity. But because of, you know, later in life, we are so good at analytical thinking, we kind of bury this sense, this visual sensitivity, and then we are just sensitive to what object we see. So I think this is the major step for visual art appreciation. You go back to the basic, you know, the color, the shape, the line, the volume, and that what kind of, you know, the feeling or emotion and provoke from you, and then you form a dialogue. So that's my comment. So I think, you know, and David wouldn't just explain each artist, the style and all that, but he's trying to drive in that, you know, it has its own language. Here, there is a question from Ashley Cristiano. Thank you for talking about how to look at an abstract painting. I was wondering if you could elaborate a bit more. I'm curious about the artist's voice and the way we read the artist's voice. Should looking at abstract paintings be an autonomous experience, or should it be about learning and inviting conversations?
Ashley, that's a really, really good and very difficult question. You know, I would try to answer it this way. Most people are intimidated by abstract painting. There's several different kinds of abstraction, okay? I practice a lyrical abstraction, which I think has a poetic readability, but then there are abstractions that are absolutely based in a kind of theory, you know, and can require sometimes, like in a Saul LeWitt, you know, the necessary education to truly appreciate, you know, what he's going about doing. But for the most part, I just I think I think appreciation of abstraction is autonomous, if I understand, you know, the question, because I'm just asking you, I'm asking everybody to uh, look, just look, you know, stand in front of a work and look. Don't prejudge. Don't allow yourself to be intimidated by the fact that you say, well, I don't really understand art, so therefore I can't really have anything to say here or enjoy it or whatever. That is so sad, you know. You know, when we were children, I did a number of years as an elementary school teacher, 3 years actually. And my fourth grade students, my third and fourth grade students, they were just joyous. They just made things that it was like dancing and singing. You know, they just made things that were just fun and great. Get to the sixth grade, all of a sudden they become super self-conscious. There's one person in the class that draws the best horses, another person in the class that draws the best cars, and therefore I can't draw. I can't draw. You know, that was the usual kind of response, you know, or I can't experience because I don't know. Well, I'm asking anybody to literally kick back and listen to the music, you know, look at the paintings, try to decide for yourself if there's anything there for you. If there's not, there's not. But don't prejudge your right to your opinion. Okay, your opinion is important, and it's not, and you don't have to wait for somebody else to tell you what that should be.
Thank you, David. Just an interruption. Philip, somebody said the WeChat code, the QR code doesn't work. And so the next question is.
Getting late, Dacia, too. I thought.
I know, I'm sorry, I cannot let you go. You briefly mentioned that you like to see paintings in museum gallery settings. So what is lost when it is printed in a book or photographed?
Scale. You know, you can read that it's so many inches high and so many inches wide or centimeters, whatever, but that's not the same thing as standing there and experiencing it. Your body, we all have a kind of body presence. You know, we stand in front of a painting. Some people are 6'6", some people are 5'3". That doesn't really matter. Within that range, we are experiencing our body to the body of the painting there. So scale is one thing, surface is another, texture is important. Technology is getting better and better at reproduction. There's no question about that. When the Barnes collection, you know, was being established by Dr. Barnes back when, he bought all these Matisse and all this Van Gogh and all of these Renoirs and all of this stuff. He insisted in his will that nothing would ever be photographed in color, because color photography was pretty bad in those days, you know, and everything had to be in black and white. Well, you know, they ignored his stuff now. That's photographed in color. You can see Matisse's Joy of Life in color, all right? But you cannot experience that painting unless you're standing in front of it and looking at it. And so for me, true color, true scale, true surface, true experience. Again, that feeling of the hand of the artist making that picture, you know, is to me what's lost in a book.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know. We still have quite a few questions. So how does abstract painting relate to subconscious mind?
I don't think I'm equipped to answer that question. You know, I can say that it relates to my subconscious mind, because I'm always surprising myself with how the connections that I've made in a given painting to what I've been feeling or thinking about or seeing. And like I said, even in that painting of Giotto, you know, where the columns of the that are painted around, you know, the Last Supper, how that image sort of creeps back through your subconscious and becomes part of a solution to an entirely different painting that you're making at the time. The painting is not all painting, but some painting is an act of dreaming too. You know, it's a conscious way. I used to think that, well, I never dream. Well, of course we all dream, but I never remember my dreams. So maybe that's why I create dreams, you know, through the act of painting. I don't know. It's kind of silly, but maybe that's true.
Thank you. This is well said. Couple questions. I think people ask you, do you sometimes think about your audience, or like when you use the motifs, and so you basically just pick them like by your personal feeling, or actually with the audience in mind?
No, I'm interested in the reactions of an audience, but I don't paint for an audience. As I said at the very end of my lecture, you know, I paint for myself. I think that's the only thing you can do. If you're trying to meet the needs of others, you're likely not creating something that is satisfying or real.
Mhm.
But if you're doing it for yourself and what you believe and what you feel and what you think, then there's a chance that that will resonate with others. Uh, I it has worked for me, but
Uh,
I'm not gonna. I The motifs that I choose, you know, have baggage. They have visual baggage. They've been around. People understand what some of these things are, you know. Do they understand the overall sort of combination that suggests birth, death, you know, sex, life, you know? Do those things come through? Well, it does for some people, and if and I think it could for anybody if you pay attention.
we have been so far many questions focused on your, art practice. Right now, I have two questions actually relate to you as an art educator. So first question is, would you, I'm sorry. So basically, I'm going to apply, I think where's the question? Okay, first one, how do you vision the art education in the future? How could we get more young people interested in art? And then another question is this, I'm currently applying for RISD, and I'm wondering if you have any advice for student artists.
Okay, first, I for a student applying to RISD or any other art school, you know, do just work, you know, make things. Don't, you know, make a lot of things, you know, and that experience is going to come through, you know. RISD has always taken a position that artists should not only be talented technically, but they should also be good students, for example, because, you know, a good student requires the kind of scholarly interest and intelligence and so on that's necessary, I think, these days to be a good artist as well, at least in the contemporary art world. Because you end up having to do things like I'm doing right now. Stand here, sit here, and explain yourself. You know, okay, well, you know, it's not everybody can do that, but it helps. previous question, Dacia, was
Like, how do you vision the, um,
I don't think art education, I don't know what's going to become of art education in the future, because right now, uh, the tyranny of the, not that art, like I said, art can be done with different media in different forms and so on, but the tyranny of the digital screen and in the lives of our children right now is extraordinary. The level of social anxiety, that I've seen in my students in the last few years is exponentially greater than it had been in any other period of my 40 years of teaching. And I worry about them a lot. And I don't know how they could possibly devote the time, energy, and passion to something as old-fashioned, as painting, you know.
So another type of question, basically they said, several paintings, actually many of your paintings are related to environmental
Yeah.
issue protection. And so they ask you, are you planning to create a body of work about the COVID?
I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't happen. Well, actually, it did, though they're not in this show right now, but a series of works that I did during the first year of the pandemic. I made 50, over 50 really, small paintings, all about 10 inches by 10 inches, that that were a result of the imposed isolation. I loved it. I mean, I know this is really going to sound awful, but for artists, the the isolation, the solitude that is created by the fact that you just can't go out and do anything else is a wonderful thing, So, for me, it was a year of doing nothing but painting, because I couldn't go to the opera, I couldn't go to see a film, I couldn't, I couldn't go to the theater, we weren't even supposed to go walking around in the neighborhood, so my studio was a refuge, and in that refuge there's only one thing to do.
Thank you. How has the digital revolution affected your work, and how has it influenced your students' approach to painting?
Say the very first part about that again.
So I think the digital
Oh,
revolution, yeah, the digitizing everything, the AI and the internet and the metaverse.
like I
Yeah, how does that affect your work?
attribute the levels of social anxiety to Facebook and social media. People are pe- people are comparing themselves. Young people are comparing themselves and their lives to everybody else that's online. It's sort of like reading Christmas letters every day, about what great things everybody is doing. Well, how come my life isn't so great? I don't know if there's any truth to any of this, but I do know what is true, which is the level of a social anxiety is huge. Okay. The attraction of digital media is undeniable. I mean, I can't get my grandchildren off the screens. They believe absolutely that they can multitask. They can do several things and still be on their phone all at the same time. I think it's where's the peace? Where's the calm? Where's the time to sit around and stand around and contemplate, your life, rather than being sort of engaged constantly in some degree of seductive entertainment. Um, I have no idea. Every generation, every old generation moans and groans about the previous generation. I'm a moaner and a groaner, you know, I don't know where it's going. God bless everybody. I hope it all works out, but I'm glad I'm not in it. I'm glad I'm past it, you know, okay? But, you know,
Actually, I think this problem is from your grandchild, Amy Frazer. So you have to answer her. You mentioned that you include both linear and painterly elements in your paintings. Could you point out those elements in one painting?
oh, well, linear, okay. I don't have the access to pop something up on the screen right now.
You want to share your file again?
Well, all right, okay. But this is going to be it because I'm starting to get brain dead.
I know, I'm sorry, we just actually overwhelmed you. And so you can answer her question when you get home.
Okay,
Oh, good.
let's say this painting, all right?
Mhm.
Linear is when there is a external contour and you the shape is already determined, and then you fill it in with information. Now, in a strict sense, the egg or the bird in this painting is a linear activity. You know, I know what the shape of the egg is going to be, then I'm just painting in the volume of light and shadow to create that sense of three-dimensionality and put it in the space it needs to be in the painting. Is it in the foreground? Is it in the middle ground? Is it in the background? Okay, those are linear conditions. The tulip is very strictly a linear condition because that is made up of lines, you know, but the painterly starts to come into play with not with the organic colored shapes that are in the sky space of this painting, for example. The painterly is also when I put down shapes that of color that I have screened with a painting knife through either the wallboard tape or the bus wrap to create the kind of dots and elements that way. But the painterly is also coming in the bird on the, it can be both, okay? The bird on the left side top of this painting, okay, is sort of being held up by these kind of bandage structures that kind of reach up into the sky. Those structures are made in a linear fashion, but it's also painterly in that the shapes are not already predetermined. I'm making a line, that requires that I think about, well, what's the other line going to be? And then the other, and I add and I add and I add until I'm satisfied with the shape. And so the shape has come about in a painterly fashion, even while it's being made with linear marks. One would argue that, for example, Rembrandt is certainly he was a painterly painter of his day, but by standards that would come later, you know, he's in some ways much more linear. So it's a relative comparison between, you know, eras, you know, of painting and styles.
Mhm. Just give me 2 more minutes. So since you already popped up this image, so the question, I saw your painting having X and birds motifs and also having some kind of fibers woven into different structures. What did that fiber structure represent?
Well, for one thing, it's an improvisation, it's riffing, you know, it is just, you know, putting down one line after another, creating a volume, a form, and ultimately a condition that can either suggest architecture or can suggest organic, you know, shapes in the garden. But it's the wrapping and wrapping is it's a pleasure, you know. I can meditate in some ways while I'm doing these kind of linear forms, you know. I'm just paying attention to where the brush mark is and how I move it. and it's enormously satisfying. And I end up eventually with something that I build with, that I put onto or with or add to, you know, and so on. Again, every painting is a mostly additive, but there's still a great deal that's subtracted. There are things that I spend days on working, and finally in the end the painting is not working, and I have to destroy that particular area that I've already spent so much time painting. So I just let it hang around for a while until I forget that I made it and how much time it took me to do it, and then I go back in with a fervor to destroy areas of the painting, which are then going to allow me to bring the painting back to life.
Mhm. So I know I have many more questions. I think we have to let David go because he usually gets up at 5 a.m. and work in the studio. And it's a little overwhelming for him. So
It's not my bedtime, but my brain is.
give you one last tough question, and then we'll thank you and let you go. People here, we can, I mean, if you want, we can stay and discuss things, and you are
I'm also
more than
willing
welcome to stay. Yeah. Mhm.
to go ahead and forward any email questions to me.
Oh, that's great too. So I think, yeah, this is really a little tough one. But I want your answers because probably some artists, you know, students, they're also facing that. Is your painting considered as your language communication with yourself and others? If yes, is there any time in your painting life that you could not paint anything or felt no creativity at all? How did you overcome it?
Okay, yes, it's an act of communication, primarily with myself. I paint in order to find out how I think. But also, I'm very interested and I'm very aware, you know, of the how it might be seen by others, you know, and understood by others, you know. Have I ever been like a kind of artist version of writer's block, you know, where I couldn't work? No, because I've refused to make the kind of paintings that require me to come up with the idea for a painting before I start to paint it. For me, the business of painting is such a joy. It's so challenging. It's so difficult. It's so engaging, you know, that I just want to get up every day and do it. And I don't want to be blocked by the notion. It's like, well, what should I be painting? When I was young, trying to figure out what I was going to paint was a burden. Well, I figured out how I could avoid that.
Mhm. So David, I have never seen a human figure in your painting. So that's a question. Why so?
It's too literal. It's too specific. It points the painting into a narrative specificity that I really don't want. You know,
Mhm, mhm.
I think there's humans. I think my paintings are full of human being, but it's a human being of the spirit, not a literal face, hand, or leg. You know, so you know that's all I can say.
Thank you so much. I robbed 3 more minutes from you. I know you promised 1 hour. Now it's 1 hour 33 minutes. Thank you so much, David. And we'll let you go. And thanks for the audience. And
Yeah.
if any of you are interested to talk, I think Philip probably can enable just all of you to chat. And if you think, you know, it's better we talk later, that's fine too.
Well, I've enjoyed this very much. I love your gallery, Dacia, is wonderful. It's the perfect space for my work, and the lighting that you have there at the gallery is remarkable. And the location on the main street there in Palo Alto is such fun. You know, I hope the show continues to be a success for you.
Yes, it is. And thank you. It's an honor to have your work, you know, shown in our gallery.
there in the
And
bedroom that entertained my wife and I at some wonderful dinners. Thank you, thank you, thank you very much. We had a great week, you know, in Palo Alto. Thank you.
thank you. So I think have a great evening.
All right.
Bye. So Philip, yeah, I think it's either we can finish this meeting. I know one person asked whether we can in the future host a Zoom meeting showing David paint. I will talk to him and say whether that's possible. And any of those, for those of you, you raised question, if I have not, got your question to David, I apologize, but you're more than welcome to email us your questions and I can send to him. And so our email address is just QCA, Qualia Contemporary Art, QCA _info, so INFO at qualiagallery.com. If you send us your questions, we'll record all the questions and send to him and get back to you all. And if you want to get it in the WeChat group, I hope Philip has already fixed the problem. And if not, I think you can always find a way to connect to me. And if you are in the Bay Area, you're more than welcome to visit us. And so hope we can do more, events like this in the future. I really appreciate your interest in art. And thanks for your support to our events and to our gallery. Philip, can you convert to Zoom or?
Hello, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and then we'll see because they probably cannot talk. Let's look at it. And
如果是想问问题的话，可以举手，我们可以把他的麦克风打开。
Yeah, I'm sorry, Christopher Benson. We just too many questions, so I didn't get you through. So send your questions. I will get you connect to David. He's very kind, but he's, he works really hard. He always get up early, and then we cannot keep him too late. Otherwise, I think we'll just finish the meeting, and I'll see you all next time. Thank you, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you,大姐
Bye.
Thank you. 今天 gallery 不开是吧？
今天画廊不开，但是呢，我们是这样的，星期天的话，如果说你有一个 group 的话，你可以先跟我们预约。所以我们画廊现在开的时间不是特别多，但是我们一直强调，就是说我们是可以，就是 by appointment。即使有些时间我们画廊是不开的，但是 by appointment 的我们是可以，一般情况下我们都 try to honor your time。
OK， 那挺好。
对，
好的，
好的，
谢谢你，辛苦了。
大家 ，Thank you all，
OK， 拜。
Bye。